Welcome to today's episode of the ISO for Gonzaga Nation Media Network. This is Wednesday's episode so it's a Mailbag Wednesday episode. Unfortunately, we're going to be releasing it on Thursday. Lots of things going on up here in Spokane right now. So a little bit late in getting this out, but as typical, it is Mailbag Wednesday. We'll answer 2 or 3 questions. If you have a question, send it my way, either on social media. Twitter is at Dan Dickau 21. Instagram is ddickau21. Or you can email me, dickau@scorebooklive.com, as well as hit up one of our social media channels for Gonzaga Nation SI. So we'll get right into it. Tim from Ritzville asks, what is left for the Gonzaga basketball program to achieve? Good question, Tim. I touched on this a little bit last week leading up to the draft with Chet Holmgren. Obviously, he ended up going number 2 to Oklahoma City, which I think is a better fit for him than being number 1 at Orlando. But I think there are 2 distinct achievements, awards, accolades for the Gonzaga program. And that is, the first one is obviously win a national title. They've knocked on the doorstep a couple of times by playing in the championship game. First one in 2017, losing to Carolina. Second one, losing to Baylor after being undefeated throughout the regular season. So I think that's one. And then I think the second kind of benchmark that is left would be to have a number 1 draft pick. That is something that when you look at overall pictures of number 1 draft picks, you're talking about guys from Kentucky, guys from Duke, guys from Carolina. Very rarely does a number 1 pick kind of come up out of the blue. One of the last that I can really think of would be Michael Olowokandi from Pacific in the kind of mid to late 90s. But typically what that means is, if you are recruiting high level guys and then you develop them in for the year, maybe or 2 that they're on campus and they have a great experience, other guys are going to want to follow that. They're going to want to follow that blueprint. And so I think that's what you're seeing now with Gonzaga. They're involved with a lot of high level players. So that's going to be really fun and interesting to track how they recruit the quote 2023 class to be seniors, and then start keeping their eye on the 2024 class to be juniors. So great question, Tim. I appreciate it. Next question comes from San Diego, and this is from Jeff. He asks, what is free agency like for a professional basketball player? Well, there's a couple different levels of free agency in my eyes. You get your clear-cut tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is kind of how I like to look at a lot of different things. So the tier 1 free agents are the guys that your agent's already been kind of, back channel conversations with multiple teams. So you've got a good idea about who and what teams are going to be offering a contract. You might even have a framework and an idea of what the terms might look like. Now, you can't accept any of those terms, although there are some wink deals, I'm sure, that are already done across the board in the NBA, always has been. But for the tier 1 guys, I mean, things are moving pretty quickly. You're going to hold meetings in the first 24 to 48 hours of free agency. You might go to that city and visit that organization and be face-to-face for those meetings. They may come to you, but you're really getting a feel for, are you a true blueprint part of what their organization wants to look like? I think the biggest one right for this summer free agency, when you talk about a tier 1, is Jalen Brunson. He's going to have lots of ideas and options of places to go to, but the tier 1 guys are typically going to, agree to their contract. And I would say you're going to see a lot of agreements in the first 48 hours. And then, the first 5-6 days of free agency is always just bonkers, that's where the bulk of the money in free agency is spent. And then you'll get your tier 2 guys, which is where I kind of fell into a category where your agent's talking to multiple teams, trying to sift out and sort out who really may be interested, who may be having availability roster wise, And then it's on your agent to start figuring out what they have uh, uh, roster or salary cap wise, what's even available, what's even possible, and then what your market value should be. And so there's lots of moving parts. And the tier two, that's usually you start kind of getting into that the second week of free agency. For myself, it was about the third or fourth week of free agency where after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, we kind of pinned it down to 3 or 4 teams. It was going back to New Orleans. It was Utah. It was Toronto, who ended up signing Jose Calderon, and then Boston. So we kind of knew it was those 4 teams that were the most likely for myself to land. And then it was just a matter of letting the tier one finish things out and then seeing where my true market value would lie, and then just kind of making a decision based on that once the negotiations or the conversations got to the point where there might be structure of a contract. So it's stressful, but for myself, when I was in that tier two category, how I would describe it, you're not getting anything that first, 5-6 days. You're keeping an eye on it because you want to see if there's any trades that may, excuse me, impact where you think you might be going or who may have had interest in you, but things change pretty quickly. So it's stressful, but at the same time, you got to enjoy it. You only get very few opportunities like that to be a part of something where you're wanted. And then the third tier of free agents are your guys that are really kind of waiting up to the last minute in regards to wanting maybe a 1-year make good contract in a training camp, or trying to figure out a 2-way contract now with the G League and an NBA team. So I was in that position at the end of my career, and I waited on a training camp invite, and it came through with Phoenix. So that's the more stressful ones, because a lot of times that's just figuring out what roster is a best fit to give you an opportunity to make a team. At that point, you're not really care about what the possible financial package is. You just want to have an opportunity to make a team based on what the roster looks like. So great question, Jeff. Appreciate it. Last question from the day comes from Brad in Vancouver, and he asks, what are your thoughts on UNC being ahead of Gonzaga in some of the early polls? Well, as I look at the calendar right now, it's June 29th. We still got about 4 months, July, August, September, October, until guys are really getting ready for, that first exhibition game. And the Gonzaga just had their first true summer practice. You can have a limited amount of summer practices and then summer workouts with coaches. I don't think anybody in that basketball staff and office have given any thoughts to where they rank in these way too early polls, which a lot of them are called. It's something that's fun for analysts to put together, journalists to put together. It's fun for fans to kind of look at and think about what might be. I think Carolina, obviously, they're defending champs. Baycott's back. They're a very talented roster. I know they picked up some pieces in the transfer portal. But at the end of the day, it's way too early. That's why they call them the way too early polls. Gonzaga got some great pieces back, obviously, in Timmy, Strother, and Bolton, and then added some great ones in Efton Reed, for example. But, I don't have too many thoughts because it's way too early. There's 4 months of skill development individually, team development, chemistry wise to happen. So once we kind of get into more, probably early August is when I start diving into really looking at the overall lay of the land and where teams may fit. Because at that point, you start talking to college coaches as well, a little bit more in depth on their teams. So appreciate the question, Brad. So thank you again. If you have a question, send it my way or send it to Gonzaga Nation SI. Thanks for watching and or listening. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and review.